Now, the Bangladeshi student group leading protests against civil service hiring rules have set a 48-hour deadline for the government to meet its demands. They are calling on authorities to restore the internet, withdraw curfews, and release detained protesters. More than 100 people have been killed in clashes. The unrest began after the government reintroduced a controversial quota system where 30% of civil service jobs were set aside for the families of veterans. The Supreme Court drastically scaled back the quota to 5%. I spoke earlier to Tasneem Halil, a Bangladeshi journalist who lives in exile in Sweden, and I asked him if the situation today is now calmer.
Thank you, Claire. The situation has come down a little bit. We have seen, we did not see any major clashes, at least in Dhaka. But on the other hand, people's lives are really, really disrupted. We are hearing reports that hospitals are, blood banks are running out of blood. As you know, there are thousands of injured people seeking medical care right now. Mobile money, Bangladesh economy is very much dependent on mobile money. That is not working. Phone connections locally even are not working. So it's very, very disruptive. It's very, very fluid, I'll have to say.
And communication has been difficult too, hasn't it? I understand there has been a nationwide internet blackout in Bangladesh for 5 days now. Why do you think the government is restricting the flow of information this way?
Well, this is not really surprising because whenever governments in South Asia crack down on their own population, they very often shut down internet connections. We have seen that elsewhere in Kashmir, for example, in Indian occupied Kashmir, that whenever there is a crackdown on protesters there, the Indian government shuts down the internet. So similar things are happening in Bangladesh right now. That Bangladesh government, when they think that they're going to crack down very brutally on the protesters and they don't want the world to really know in real time what is happening, they censor that whole flow of information by just cutting the wire, in a quite literal sense.
I want to ask you, we've mentioned that the Supreme Court's decision to change this controversial quota system, we've mentioned that decision, it is accommodating students' demands in a way. Do you see this as a victory for the protest movement?
Of course, it is a victory. The Supreme Court judgment or the direction actually confirms what the students have always been saying. They have been saying and claiming that it is not actually about the courts. It is actually the executive branch of the government that has the authority, that has the legal power to do whatever it wants with the quota. So even if you look at the verbal decision that came through the Supreme Court yesterday, the court is saying exactly the same thing. The government is free to do whatever it wants. The 5% or 1%, percentages that the court has mentioned, the government is free to even revise those. So it is always, that's exactly what the students have been saying. So the court really was not an issue. If the government wanted to, they could have accepted the students' very legitimate, very valid demand on day one, instead of, going into indiscriminate killings of these protesters.
So is that what this is really about here? Are there other specific demands that the students have?
Oh, right now, the movement has completely moved beyond the demand for reform to quotas in government jobs. Right now, they are demanding, for example, the resignation of the Home Minister, the resignation of the one of the most senior leaders of the ruling Awami League Party, the Transportation Minister, Obaidul Qadir. They want Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister herself, to take full responsibility for all the murders, killings, and apologize to the nation. They want all the police chiefs who had command responsibility over the killings to be fired. And there are like a set of 9 demands. I'm not going to go into that. But those are the major demands right now they have. And I think these demands actually have widespread public support inside and outside Bangladesh.
And can you help us understand how this student protest movement is organized? Do you think this is a force that could potentially be politically active in the long term beyond just this?
It's a very good question. I mean, the people who are leading the movement right now, the current student movement, some of them were the leaders of a grassroots movement that we saw in 2018. At that time, these were school students, and they were protesting, they were demanding safety on Bangladeshi roads. And that movement was also brutally suppressed. So, I mean, those kids that we saw in 2018 come out on the streets saying that we do not want to be any longer killed on the streets because of this terrible safety situation in Bangladeshi roads. These are the same people who are actually now organizing and leading this movement. It is a very good question. I think, I mean, these are like new generation of activists. Bangladesh is witnessing the birth of a new generation, and they are becoming very engaged on some of the most burning issues in the country.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights with us. I'm afraid that's all we have time for now. We very much appreciate your time, though. That is Tasneem Khalil, a Bangladeshi journalist, joining us today from Sweden.